Hello and welcome to week 10 in Intro to Sociology. And what timing this is, that here we are, chapter 17, looking at government and politics right on the week of a national election. How cool is that? And so what we're going to be looking at first and foremost is making a distinction between sociology and political science. And so political science really does look at government, looks at committees, looks at government structures, looks at the documents that make up government and what all that means, and interpreting the distribution of power and resources and whatnot on that level. Sociology encompasses all of that, but it also is broad enough to encompass the politics that exist at all levels of our society. There are politics in your family. There are politics in your snowmobile club. There are politics in your Cub Scout troop. There's all kinds of these things that are going on. Understanding these, the ways in which people negotiate the notion of power and authority. It becomes one of the first topics that we look at in the course book, is this notion of power and authority. And where does that come from? So let's define these first. So you have power is the ability to manipulate resources, manipulate people, move things around. Think about how much power, move something, think about a force against a block, right? In physics, right? Moving it along, the definition of that is power. And so authority is all of that, but it's been legitimized. It's been legitimized by the people surrounding that entity, that person or that government, that gives it that authority. And I guess that's sort of where we see government coming in, is that government is a social structure, social institution based in our country, based on written documents that designate authority or legitimized power to offices that are then occupied by individuals, many times selected by the governed. So we have spots like this coming week here, we will be selecting the President of the United States for the next 4 years. So as a society, we get the opportunity to select the individual who has that particular package of authority. We also get to select our senators, maybe some local board members like the school board and whatnot. They're all very, very important part of our society, is that ability for us to select the individuals who will occupy those positions defined by these documents. And that is where we see the concept of the rule of law, which is who is occupying that position is in some ways irrelevant. Their powers, what they're able to do, are defined by documents that live beyond that person's tenure in that position, possibly, and in many cases, living beyond that person's even life. And so, as a country that is based on the rule of law, we have a constitution, and the constitution defines all of these positions of power and authority, and it limits them. It's important to recognize that the founders, the framers of our form of government here in the U.S. were moving away from what at that time was a pretty common form of government, which was the monarchy, which consolidated power and authority into an individual. So that individual's personal will was the law of the land. And they felt, nope, we should kind of collectively negotiate what the law of the land is, and then people, place people in these positions of enforcing it, revising it, determining whether they're right or not, having these like our branches of government, and then making those positions subject to the will of the people, at least to some degree. And so that experiment of the U.S. Constitution, which of course has traveled around the world, probably our number one export as a country, was we weren't the first to come up with this kind of stuff, but we were the first big country that did it. And there's of course lots of success and of course lots of challenges to that. Now, mind you, that document represents what in the philosophy of sociology we refer to as the social contract. The social contract is the document, the rule of law, that we have all collectively, in direct or indirect ways, contributed to. And when we register to vote, we actually say, I'm going to follow it. You know, when we register to vote, if you read all the fine print on that little document, what you'll see is that essentially you are bequeathing your constitutional right for self-governance to others, to a representative who has been district to your idea, ED, district, to you, and you have representatives that will then go in and they will modify, support, enforce, interpret, whatever, the collective social contract, and you will be responsible for that. So I am basically saying, yep, I agree, I shouldn't go too fast on the road, and if the police officer pulls me over and I am found guilty of doing that, then I will have to pay a fine. I agree with that because I registered to vote. And so, but when we send people to do those things, we also give them the power to modify that document. That document is not a sacred document, although for many people it does have a certain sacred quality to it. And that's where we see the kind of division between liberal and conservative. Now, right now, as I'm speaking, we have a new Supreme Court justice. Now, this Supreme Court justice has a history of conservative points of view, meaning that interpretations of the law should be grounded in the actual language as it applied in the day it was written. So the conservative viewpoint is, from the framers' perspective, what did they mean? A more liberal interpretation of the Constitution would say that, well, what do we think those individuals would say under current day circumstances, and interpreting the law that way. Both are very valid, both are very circumstantial, these are very specific to cases that are going on, but the new structure of the Supreme Court now has a majority rather than a split, more even split between those who are traditionalist and more conservative and those who are liberal. Now it's much more leaning conservative, and there may be consequences in terms of the interpretation of the Constitution. Now, at the same time, the legislature is responsible for writing the laws. Now, the separation of powers means that this is again how the document, the Constitution, defines people's jobs. So the legislature, the House representing population, and the Senate representing the states. This is a really good design, by the way, and they together construct the law of the land. The Supreme Court hears cases challenging whether or not those laws are in line with the overall sense of the Constitution. And the executive, which is the president, is involved in, it's actually law enforcement. It's the enforcement of the law. So the president has all of the military and the police and all that's all one big hierarchy for enforcing the law. You have the legislation that makes the law, and then you have the Supreme Court that interprets the constitutionality of the law. So these things, these positions, this old thing has been defined in a document, the rule of law, and we get to elect those individuals. So voting is really, really important. The more people that vote, the more those individuals represent what most of us want. It's not perfect. It's not perfect, and we elect people, and we've all had the notion that people have, we send them to office and they don't do what we thought they were going to do. But that's our system. And so, with all that said, one of the first things, and it comes up in the discussion here, one of the things I want you to do this week is, with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, authority and the ability for governors and local officials and the president to dictate particular things to happen has been on people's minds. Now I'm going to tell you a story because it relates to the assignment, and that's where I go to a fairly conservative Christian church. And when the rules came out about gathering, there was a lot of talk about that. There was a lot, she can't do that. We have a right to meet as a religion, freedom of religion and religious expression and all that stuff. And, there was challenges to that, challenges to the church leadership. Why are you going along with this? We're supposed to, what's more important, the laws of the land or God's commands or whatever. Now, in my liberal mind, I did not have any conflict with this. However, the church leadership at my particular church, this is a Faith Church in Waterville, they came out with a document, and the document is amazing, and I've given you a copy of it to take a look at it. Not to get you to go over to Faith, that's not my goal. My goal is to show you rational thinking as it can exist within this church. The church elders got together, including an attorney who is one of our elders, and constructed this document talking about authority and how authority is outlined in the civil world, and then what does it mean to subject yourself to civil authority from a biblical perspective. And it is awesome. It is an awesome collection of ideas that basically put to rest the notion that, in fact, the governor does have the authority to do that, and why, constitutionally and legislatively, they're able to do that. Why it's not a breach, because all companies, all institutions couldn't gather. If it was just churches, that would be a violation, but it wasn't. And then, moving forward, why, where in the Bible does it say that Christians need to subject themselves to local authorities and understand that those leaders have been placed on earth by God? So, even if you're not religious, it's a great document to read about how power turns into authority, how that kind of exchange happens. And I shared that with you. I want you to read it and kind of get into that. Now, right at the beginning, I told you that sociology is a lot more than politics, that we see on the national and even local scale, and yet then I went off on that. But it also happens every time we're making decisions, whether it's a family, a group, a committee, or anything. The way people interact, their forces of their personality, exercising their skills, the ability to talk well and present an argument, and to move people in a particular direction. These are all powers that people have that they use to influence people, to motivate them, to move them, or maybe even manipulate them and move them in a direction. We see that in family, among our friends, in our schools, in our snowmobile club. We see that everywhere. This exists. So the individual that says, I'm not into politics, is probably referring to the national state stuff that's going on. And I understand, it's really hard. Can't even watch a YouTube video now without somewhere halfway you get a video coming on about a candidate. But but they're not referring to the politics that happens in everyday life, that the politics that we engage in simply when we're trying to decide where to go out to eat, or what we're going to do, or what we're going to buy the kids for Christmas, or whether we're not going to hand out treats for Halloween today, which I'm recording this on Halloween. Those things are all considered aspects of politics. I go into some other concepts here: groupthink, the Challenger accident, which was a result of groupthink, and then the different forms of government that are out there, and we arrive at the end of the chapter. So chapter 17, discussion, I want you to go ahead and read that document and understand it's from Christians to Christians, so it's okay to read it and say, the Bible's not that important and whatnot. But I want you to see it in its context of understanding how power and authority is governed in the state of Maine. It's a great analysis of that, particularly in contrast to a social organization that aligns itself with a sacred document that is above that. And so it's the balance between that. It's a brilliantly written letter. And in the assignment, however, the assignment one is personal soapbox of mine. I can't imagine a more important civil duty that we have than to participate in this ability that we have that so many don't have. And increasingly more people have it, but so many people don't have the opportunity to select their leaders. And we do, and collectively, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, whether you're blue or red, doesn't matter. You got to go out there and vote. And so if you can provide me with documentation, a picture of yourself holding the vote. I don't need to know who you voted for. I don't need to know any of that. Just want to encourage you and reward you if you're going to vote. And you get a perfect grade when you show me that. I will probably trust you if you just tell me that you're, and you can tell me any way you want. If you want to just keep it private, that's fine. There is a discussion board to post that stuff on, I think. And then we can share the fact that we are all participating in that process. And hopefully the outcome will be awesome, and we can move on to the next phase of our country's life and get those commercials off the TV, which would be really good. All right, so that is today's. This is coming out on Monday. Tomorrow you're looking at this on Monday. Hopefully tomorrow, Tuesday, the 3rd of November, you need to go vote. If you're getting this, if you've already voted, that is awesome. I've already voted. Many people have already voted. In fact, I found out today more people have voted before, early voting in Texas than the entire voting people that turned out in 2016. Wow. You know what this means? People care. Regardless of what they voted for, they care enough to get out, get off the couch, go out and do their civic duty. So go do the same, and I will see you in discussions.